We have raised $4 million and we still have $2 million to go.
How can they possibly raise from a fairly small community the kind of dollars required to make this happen?
You're always worried. You're always worried. You go ahead or not.
The kind of evolving proposals and deals that were happening in 1995 were all put on hold and didn't get really resolved until a number of years later.
This is a story involving a small group of dedicated and persistent individuals and the community they represent. These people would embark on an arduous project which would take over 20 years to complete. This is the story of the Ummah Masjid. Those of us who live in Halifax are used to the term historic as an appendage to our city's name. Sometimes it feels like our little burg is a living museum. What we often forget, though, is that not all history is to be found in museums. Case in point would be the building going up on the corner of St. Matthias and Charles Street, just off Shabukdo Road, not far from downtown Halifax. What is this oriental-looking structure? Who's building it and why? What is the story behind it? Why here? Why now? The story begins in the late 20th century. Up until the 1980s, there were fewer than 200 Muslims living in cities scattered along the eastern coast of Canada. These early Muslim settlers were mostly of Lebanese and Syrian origin.
I came to Halifax back in the 80s, specifically 1983. The community was quite small. When we prayed Eid, and Eid is the largest festival of Muslims, and everybody came from all over Nova Scotia. We prayed in the Dartmouth prayer hall, and the maximum capacity of that prayer hall is about 200.
During the first Gulf War in 1990, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, many Muslim families found themselves in a horrific situation.
Many immigrants started coming to Halifax. I think the majority of immigrants were Muslims, and the nationalities were Palestinian and Iraqi and other Muslims.
By 1993, the Muslim population had risen significantly to 3,000 families. It was soon apparent that they would need to expand the existing Islamic school located in the Dartmouth Mosque. They decided to develop a new mosque that would accommodate the growing community at that time and for many years to come. The project would have to be funded through private donations, as Islam prohibits the use of interest. It was therefore the responsibility of the Ummah, or community, to raise these funds. They decided that they would start the process and have faith that the money would come later.
So the Islamic Association started looking for a place, a larger place where everybody can be accommodated for several functions, including like the weekly congregation and the Eid, which is, we have 2 Eids in a year, 2 festivities and so on.
The community began searching for a location where they could establish the new mosque. They tried renting a space, purchasing an old church, and buying a lot. All attempts failed. The search went on for 4 long years until the 20th of March, 1995.
But then finally, the city of Halifax was selling the property in Shabukdo Road.
The city of Halifax had some surplus property, and so it began to consider what to do with those buildings, and I think it issued a call for expressions of interest, a call for proposals, which resulted in several proposals being made by different groups, one of which was the Islamic Association of Halifax, as well as the Black Educators Society, I think it was called, as well as the Micmac Friendship Association. And they all came forward expressing interest.
The property in Chibacto Road are the large building, the larger school, which is the music school, and two other bungalows or smaller buildings. That large building is a heritage building. So the maintenance of that building is really high. It's an old building. It's the oldest. It's about 100-year-old. The other two buildings are about 60 years old, and they are not heritage, and that's why the Muslim Academy is interested.
Well, I think it's fair to say that there's a very interesting old building there, the old Chibacto Road School. It's a very imposing structure at the corner of, it's almost at the corner of Chibacto Road and Windsor Street. Built in 1910, along with a number of other schools that were built in the Halifax Peninsula at that time. The Chibacto Road School served the whole school population of that middle part of the Halifax Peninsula. It's very interesting architecturally. It's in a kind of modern classical design, and also it's got some interesting associations with the Halifax explosion, which occurred in 1917, about 7 years after the building was built. On December 6, 1917, Halifax explosion happened. There was a collision of two munition ships in Halifax Harbour, and it devastated pretty much the whole north end of Halifax. The Chibacto Road School was relatively untouched by the explosion at that time, and so it was used as a triage center and as a morgue for those killed in the explosion. And then about a couple of weeks later, a memorial service was held in the schoolyard of the building for those killed in the explosion. And what's interesting was an ecumenical service which all the religious faiths in the community came together at that particular service on, I think it was December 17th, 1917. So that's a fairly strong historical association between that particular building and the Halifax explosion. And it was those considerations that led to its designation as a registered heritage property in 1991, I think it was. But this all occurred at a time when it was on the eve of amalgamation, when the city of Halifax and the city of Dartmouth and the town of Bedford and Halifax County all came together in 1996 in what is now called Halifax Regional Municipality. So the evolving proposals and deals that were happening in 1995 were all put on hold as a result of amalgamation and didn't get really resolved until a number of years later.
While reviewing all four proposals, the city came to the decision to lease all three of the buildings, which would allow them to retain full assessed value without incurring any loss.
They came forward to the executives of the Islamic Association and made an offer to lease the building to buy one of the building, which is 6225 Chibacto, which is housing the Islamic school right now. They gave them offer to lease it at $40,000 a year. Actually, it was 36 plus, so it ends up about $40,000 a year, and for a number of years. And the lease were leased to buy. And that continued until 1999. During these years, the Islamic school was trying to approach the city every year. Is it time for us to buy the building because it's leased to buy? And the school wasn't sure if the rental money, it wasn't clear in the agreement, is towards the purchase or not. But then they clarified that the money that's paid for rent is not towards the purchase, and everybody became apprehensive and they would like to buy. And after so many talks and contacts with the city, finally the city put all three buildings in that lot for sale. But at that time, only they offer the Maritime Muslim Academy and the Music Conservatory to basically bid for them.
After amalgamation, By that time, the Black Educators Association and the Mi'kmaq Friendship Association proposal had kind of fallen to one side. And instead, by 1998 or so, the Maritime Conservatory of Music had come into the picture. And so by 1998, 99 or so, this had turned into a proposal to actually sell the property and the buildings to these two organizations.
The school board started working in their proposal, and we don't know how much to bid. Like, the competition between us and the music conservatory was high, because whoever buy all three buildings. And the school board met again and again, and we don't know the value of the property in that location. It is very close to downtown, and some of us were bidding like in millions. Yeah. But anyway, one member at that time perceived maybe we can approach the music conservatory instead of trying to bid higher than them, and they are trying to bid higher than us. Maybe we can split the deal. In a while, one of the members spoke with them, and after other contacts, it turned to be it was the best deal. So at the end, the Music Conservatory and Maritime Muslim Academy went to the city and told them that we are submitting one joint proposal.
The Maritime Muslim Academy would be responsible to pay $153,000 as their part of the agreement. This was a huge step for the Muslim community. They were getting closer to achieving their goal. However, there was still the question of where the money would come from. At the end of 1999, the closing date for the proposal was quickly approaching, and the Muslim community's fundraising efforts had only amounted to $24,000 in cash. They were far behind their target.
When you start thinking of a mega project like that in relation to the resources of the community, you're always worried. You're always worried. You go ahead or not. And it is not like somebody says, "Oh, I'll go to the bank and get the money, so I know it." You don't know even whether you'll be able to procure enough donations for this. What happened if you start the construction and halfway through you're not able to continue? It could be huge loss. It could be withdrawal of the building permit. So these have been issues really of real concern.
The community became increasingly concerned that if they could not come up with the money soon, the city would withdraw the proposal. Then came a tragic turn of events. On September 2nd, 1998, Swiss Air Flight 111, on a scheduled flight from New York to Geneva, crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, 8 kilometers from the Nova Scotia shoreline. All 229 passengers on board died in the accident, including a Saudi prince by the name of Bandar bin Abdulaziz. Prince Bandar's brother, Nawaf, in an effort to assuage his grief, visited Halifax.
At that time, I was the chairman of the board of directors of the Maritime Muslim Academy. I spoke with him, and after we condoled him and everything, he came to me and he said the family, his mom in particular, is very interested in doing something in memory of his brother who wasn't recovered in this city, because his mother is really like heartbroken and everything, and she would like to do something in this city so that like he's remembered where he died. They agreed to pay the bill for the purchase. They sent us $200,000 US, and they said you can use the extra money to do maintenance of the building or for future like renovation or whatever.
The main building, the old Shibakto Road School, was sold to the Maritime Conservatory of Music, and the rest of the property, which had the 2 old, smaller, what were called the bungalow buildings, was sold to Maritime Muslim Academy.
We did engineering assessment, and the engineering assessment showed that that bungalow is not structurally sound, and there is some mold in the basement, Nonetheless, we decided to use it for a year or two until we raise funds to build a prayer hall.
However, their jubilation was short-lived, as the community was about to face their biggest obstacle yet.
There was a proposal to actually build this new build, to demolish the old bungalow and build the mosque and recreation center in its place. And it's at that time that the question of the heritage designation of the building came into the picture.
We got a letter from the Heritage Department, that was in July 2001. They came forward and they said all 3 buildings are heritage. Although when we purchased the building, they made it very explicit and clear it's only the Music Conservatory building was heritage. At that time, a fellow by the name Kevin Barrett, he said all 3. And he has a clause that if there is one building in an area that's heritage and the other 3 are associated with the building, he said they are all 3 of them heritage.
If the heritage designation did apply to all 3 buildings, the community's plans to demolish the bungalow would not be approved. Heritage buildings are protected from demolition, and therefore the community would not be able to build their new masjid on this site.
When the old school was designated as a registered building in 1991, the designation, it turned out, applied to the entire property, so it wasn't just the main school, but it was also the 2 old bungalows that were kind of brought into that net as well. From a legal perspective, because under the Heritage Property Act, when a building is registered, the registration applies not only to the building, but to the entire piece of land.
The community had come so far and would not give up easily. Dr. Salah Ali, a respected engineer from the Islamic community, thoroughly researched the issue and was able to prove without doubt that when the buildings had originally been registered as heritage, it was only the Music Conservatory which was mentioned in the documentation. The 2 bungalows clearly had their own pre-existing civic addresses and were excluded from the request for heritage status. It was also noted that the Music Conservatory was the only building existing at the time of the Halifax explosion, which was a major factor in its historical significance. The other 2 bungalows were not built until a few years later. Dr. Ali's efforts were finally rewarded after 2 years of research, tension, and waiting. He received a letter from the city of Halifax on November 14, 2003, recognizing his efforts in clarifying the issue and acknowledging that, in fact, only the Music Conservatory had heritage status. The Muslim community of Halifax breathed a sigh of relief. They would finally be able to continue their work creating a design for their project and to plan for their eventual victory celebration. By 2003, the Muslim population in Halifax had grown to more than 20,000, and a new design was necessary to accommodate this new figure. Dan Goodspeed, Jamal Bawzir, and Muhammad Mahmoud all worked together to create a design that would suit the current situation. The newly designed project would cost $6 million. Because the new design would incorporate a community center, the provincial government generously supported the project and donated $750,000, with an additional $10,000 from Health Nova Scotia. This project needed a name, and after some deliberation, the name Ummah Masjid was chosen. By the way, the term masjid is the proper Arabic term for what is generally referred to as a mosque, and, as mentioned earlier, Ummah means community. The new masjid would have certain elements from early Islamic architecture, specifically a dome and a minaret. In keeping with Islamic principles of conservation, the masjid will be heated and cooled with a modern geothermal system. The outside of the masjid, although Islamic in style, uses similar bricks and other details in an effort to match the conservatory building and create a feeling of harmony on the site.
In the redesign, what we did is we took the gymnasium and recessed it into the ground and placed the prayer hall on top of it. That is pretty much the driver of the building form, because when you put that many people in two large spaces that are removed from ground level, you need a lot of stairs to make sure that the exits are properly provided and that you have full access to the facility. So the building becomes basically a stack of a gymnasium that is pushed down into what is essentially a basement level with a prayer hall on top, stairwells in each of the four corners, and then the small auxiliary spaces fitting into the wings to the south and the north side. So that was the concept that we came up with, that was taken back to the community and then approved. So those, I guess, were the major determinants on the building design.
Beautiful as it may be, the new masjid is also functional. It will house a community center with gym, kitchenette, library, seminar and meeting rooms, and a computer lab. There are also plans for a youth activity room where teens can socialize and enjoy wholesome activities.
One of the features in the design of this masjid is to restore the real values that existed in early days of Islam, that the masjid should not be a place only designed for the benefit or convenience of one gender or the other. The true prophetic masjid was men-friendly, women-friendly, youth-friendly, children-friendly. And we are hoping, not only hoping, but we're trying our best also to educate the community that the masjid also should be a place where good neighborly relationship will be established. And we hope also, once the masjid is completed, that our friends would be coming for discussion, for dialogues, dealing with common social issues that is of concern of all. The masjid should serve that purpose as well.
The message is letting the light in, it seems to me. It's illuminating for people what Islam is about, what this community is about, letting them see what benefits, what the wonderful contribution that is made to our larger Halifax community by the Muslim community here, and what a great facility this is going to be. This is a much needed building for the Islamic community here, but it will also serve the broader community who can come and use this. There'll be a gym, as you know, downstairs where kids will play basketball. I'm sure groups will be able to rent rooms to have meetings, and there'll be a variety of rooms for that, or for classes and workshops for the community itself. I think when this building is completed, it can help to serve the role of bringing people together. And I think that it's an important event that says to people in the surrounding community, welcome, come and join us, meet us, find out what we're all about. And people learn when they become more educated and more familiar with the people who are in a community, let's say in an ethnic community or religious community, then their lack of education on something, of course, is diminished, and their fear goes away. They see there's no reason to be fearful. They grow in their understanding, and I think that can only help to strengthen the fabric of our society.
The Ummah Masjid project has gone from wish to dream to goal to brick and mortar reality.
It's a dream come true after a long wait.
A journey of faith, a journey for striving for what is good, and a journey to expand and deepen the faith and practice of the community.
It stands now as a symbol of our community and of our faith. The Ummah Masjid has now become an integral part of the Halifax cityscape.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله.